Good. All right, we will call the January 25th, 2022 Crow Wing County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. First item, Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, I'm sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is open forum. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak towards something not on today's agenda, come forward, state your name, address, and we will limit it to a 3-minute time. So,
Mr. Chair, would you call the ones on the list first?
okay.
Thank you.
And we will be implementing these sign-in sheets for open forum. They'll be out on the table in future meetings. So if you do plan to speak on open forum, if you could fill this out, and it'll just help us with the meeting. So,
Chair, I do have to call roll.
oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Coring,
I'm here.
Commissioner Brecken,
Here.
Commissioner Barrows,
Here.
Commissioner Franzine. Here. Commissioner Hoag,
Here.
all present.
Okay,
Okay,
now we're
we're
ready
ready
for
to
open
go.
forum. All right, so we will start with those that filled this out. Robert Gross.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bob Gross. I live in Cass County. I have businesses in Crow Wing County. Election data is stored by the Secretary of State. This data is publicly available for election purposes. It shows a list of registered voters and whether or not they voted, among other things. A list allows one to know exactly who voted, or does it? In Crow Wing County, the people in Crow Wing County canvassed a number of people within the 45,200 registered voters in Crow Wing County. They were asked if they actually voted in the 2020 presidential election. When they said yes or no, they looked to see if the data matched what the Secretary of State's list said. They found the Secretary's list was correct for this parameter for 91% of the registered voters in Crow Wing County. But for 9% of the registered voters in Crow Wing County, the Secretary's list was found inaccurate. People who voted were listed as having not voted, and people who did not vote were listed as having voted. Canvassing provides real evidence. Canvassing yields statistical results. I'm going to give numbers here, so please bear with me. I'm an electrical engineer. I've been an engineer for 20, 30 years. I understand this. I use it in my business. I use it for many things. Okay, so and this is for the people that state, and I quote, "This poll wasn't very scientific." Enough people in Crow Wing County were canvassed to have a confidence level of at least 98% in the results. With our current sample size, we have a 95% confident that 9% or 4,068 votes is correct to within plus or minus 4.27%. From canvassing, we are 95% confident that at least 2,137 votes were changed. Let me go farther. We are 99% confident that at least 1,527 votes were changed. And we are 99.9% confident from our canvassing that at least 827 votes changed.
30 seconds.
Yeah, what?
30 seconds left.
Yeah. In Minnesota, election data must be accurate to 0.5%. This 0.5%, as I understand it, is inferred by law by recount requirements. 0.5% is 226 votes for Crow Wing County. Again, our canvassing, we are 99.9% confident that at least 827 votes were changed, and 827 is a lot higher than 226. Yet the Secretary of State, Steve Simon, said, without looking at or considering any of the evidence that we gathered, without questioning any of the people that gathered the evidence.
Time is up, sir.
Time limit?
Yeah, thank you. Next, Robin Sylvester.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Robin Sylvester. I'm a resident of Jenkins Township. I wanted to thank you first for responding to the inquiry of our group of the status of the requested deceased voters who in fact voted in the 2020 election for Crow Wing County. You provided affirmation that those deceased voters indeed did vote in the 2020 election, but that the voter records have been now updated. Thank you. I am asking for information about the additional voters that have been canvassed, that have either said they did not vote and their voter record states they did vote, or those voters that did vote and the records state they did not vote, so lost vote or phantom votes. That information's been provided to the county around 3 weeks ago, and we're looking for a response on that. We appreciate follow-up with both the resident and our group, but just the status of those records at your convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Kern.
Doug Kern, Crow Wing Township, Greenwood Street. Reading the article that I saw from the Secretary of State saying that we're a bunch of brainwashed people up here, you know, that's just kind of over the top. If he wants to prove that we're brainwashed, do the audit, do the forensic audit, and show us wrong, show us that we are wrong. Prove us wrong. If we're wrong, we want to know we're wrong. The statute that I read last time that we were here says that we are not counting on the Secretary of State, we're counting on you. We're counting on the county commissioners, not on the Secretary of State, we're counting on our local elected officials. That statute says that the Secretary of State is supposed to oversee the process, not run the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jeff Chesak.
Thanks, sir. Good morning, everybody. Jeff Chesak, 511 D Street. I had the opportunity to watch your Committee of the Whole meeting last week, and oh my gosh, okay, I want to thank you for that. Transit was discussed, and a couple of questions are raised, and I just want to give a little clarification. The contract began August 1st of last year. We went out for RFPs, as you know, and in the first round, we got no responses, although numerous third-party providers downloaded the RFP. Essentially, in that respect, virtually anybody that would have proposed first round would be operating the bus today, with very few exceptions. The other item, the big question was one of the questions was why would the state approve such a large increase? It's a local decision. The Transit Committee is tasked with providing recommendation to the City Council. That's by state rules. And we did that. Two of our Transit Committee members rejected the third-party contractor that was not awarded the bid. They did not fulfill all the requirements of that RFP. I think it would be hard-pressed for any of you to sit and look at RFPs that don't fulfill the requirement regardless, to accept that. And the ridership is the most important. One thing that wasn't talked about increasing revenues, increasing ridership. We talked about cutting service to different areas of the county that do not have ridership and routes to be cut. I can guarantee you that our transit coordinator is doing an excellent job. He's already very fiscally responsible. If there is not service needed or very little, he's already acting on making it a more efficient service. So you can have confidence that he is doing that already. And the item with drivers was a huge issue for our committee. And one of the things, if you looked at the June 14th Brainerd School Board meeting, they had a lengthy discussion about the lack of drivers for their school buses. 4, 5, and 6 years ago, there was an issue at the same time with our county and city service where around 2:30 in the afternoon, drivers are being taken off the buses to dial-a-ride and put on the school buses, not fulfilling the requirements of the contract. So those are some of the reasons why the vote went the way it did. And of course, our council was not unanimous. It's a service contract, not based on price. We want better service, which will then in turn create more ridership. People are happier. And you know,
30 seconds left.
Thank you. A lot of people say that, well, never need you need to use a transit service. I said the same thing. It was fascinating to me. And then one day I was using this and I thought, well, am I getting around? And I'd like you to think about all the people that ride that absolutely depend on this. It gives them independence. They go to work. They're able to do shopping, which helps our businesses. Real quickly, I'll give you a real quick story.
Yeah, time's up, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Next, Clyde.
Hi, my name is Clyde. I'm from Hillman. About a year ago, I was informed that they would be logging behind my property on the Rock Lake Access Road. I was surprised by this because I am a firm believer that most of these hills are bluffs. Logging is not allowed on bluffs, according to the county. I was recently told that I could not do any of this on my property. I came to a meeting at that time, and they gave me about an extra 0.2 of an acre that they weren't going to log on the county property. I brought my concerns before that to Commissioner Coring and Gary Griffin, and they both gave me just a bunch of reasons why they weren't going to follow these rules that I had showed them for the county. One was that the title was held by the state on this property, so they had to follow state rules. Well, the state rules are the exact same as the county rules. Either way, they had to follow. So then Gary said, well, those rules just don't apply to us. That's only for the constituents of the county. Actually, about a month ago, I had Doug come out and look at the property with me, and he agreed most of these hills probably were bluffs if they were to be measured. He said we didn't have enough time at that time to do anything about it because they're going to be logging within days here. So I'm just wondering, why does the county feel that they don't have to follow the same rules that I have to? And if they could look into why Gary Griffin feels that none of these rules apply to him. So, thank you.
And Gary, would you want to comment on that?
Sure. We did do a bluff analysis on the land that's around the Rock Lake access. The forestry staff did reserve, through county board action, reserve more trees in the bluffs. We can cut the trees if we so choose to in the bluffs. In this situation, with a second look, it was determined that it would be better for the area to go ahead and leave those trees. So that is what we did.
All right. Thank you, Gary. We'll let others speak first. All right, that's all the forms we have filled out. We'll allow more open forum today's meeting, but going forward, we're going to work off of these forums. So if there's anybody else that would like to speak. Okay. Anybody else?
Hello, my name's Andrew Dunlap. I grew up in Brainerd, lived here all my life, just south of the fairgrounds. It's pretty difficult for me to get up here, driven by the spirit. People like Jeff behind me he's like my hero. But really, I'm not up here to, I wish I could say things all about the election fraud, which we all know about, but I'm just not into that. I can't give you statistics or anything. I really appreciate the people behind me that research this and do it, But the one thing I am here to tell you is I'm here to tell you that I pray for all of you. I do. My wife does too. You're in our prayers. I have a list of your names. I know I knew if my mind would go blank here talking to you because that's just the way I am. You know, I'm really a nobody. I've never had anything to do with politics. Nobody knows who I am. Worked out at the airport for 40 years, pilot mechanic, you know, that's it. Don't know anything else. Don't know politics, never wanted to know politics. But I just would like to tell you that I know I have a bunch of Christians behind me, a lot of born-again Christians. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm here to help you. I have the book of John, if I can approach you and hand it to you. It's John out of the Bible. It's right here. And it's in the form of a whole bunch of money. So even if you don't want it, maybe you could give it to somebody who does. So I guess that's my question for you is, can I hand it to you? Or can I give it to somebody? Yes. And I know I'm probably short some, ain't I? I don't know. Well, anyhow, I don't want to be up here for my 3 minutes to run out because
30 seconds.
Okay, good. I'm out of here. Thank you for your time.
All right.
My name is Sergeant Rick Felton, and I wasn't going to speak today, but when I went through Army training, we spent a whole week on the Constitution, and it was drilled into our heads that the U.S. Army would never, ever turn its guns on its people, and that there was constitutional safeguards all throughout that process to make sure that that never happened. If we were ever given a direct order to turn our guns on the American people, we could ask for a direct order to be written down and for that officer to sign his name so that if we ever went to court-martial, we had physical evidence that said that we had been given that direct order. So we learned that the checks and balances in the Constitution guarantees everything throughout law. And we were also taught that when politicians pass laws that go against the Constitution, we were actually supposed to look at them as foreign and domestic terrorists in our own country. Right. So when we see Steve Simons passing laws that go against not only the U.S. Constitution, but also the Minnesota Constitution and his latest election laws that he passed. But he said, don't worry, this is only temporary until the pandemic is over. I have very great concerns when I see something that is very near and dear to my heart, that we learn that the Constitution is the foundation of our country. It's an absolute truth that everybody abides to the Constitution. And yet we see our politicians that do not abide by the Constitution, even though they've given a testimony and sworn on the Bible to uphold the Constitution. And yet we're told to go ahead and trust me. I can't do that. Not from a military standpoint and not only from a constitutional standpoint. Because I have to question with integrity I have to learn that their words and their actions are lining up, and that's not happening. And that's what the great concern is, and that's where the foundation of our country is being eroded. It's not we, the people here, that are eroding our democracy. It's the unlawful Constitution that's being eroded in our country. And that's the greatest concern.
Mr. Chair, if I might clarify, Mr. Dalton, Steve Simon doesn't pass legislation. The legislators pass the legislation. So he technically enforces the legislation that the legislature passes. Just wanted to make that clear.
He did pass election laws, though, against...
I'm sorry, he does not pass them. The legislature does. Commissioner Coring, would you agree with that? The legislature passes legislation, or the legislators pass legislation. correct?
That is correct, but the Secretary of State, every year when the legislative session starts, if they do have some changes, they will submit those changes to the legislature for approval.
For approval, correct. And I just wanted to clarify it, that he does not pass legislation.
All right, is there anybody else here to speak at open forum? Anyone else?
I got built-in bumpers. I'll just be very brief. I'll be very brief. One of the things I did not emphasize is my ability to watch the Crow Wing County Committee of the Whole meeting last week, and I wanted to thank you all for doing that, having it available, and I also hope you continue with the Budget Committee meeting. I know sausage is a very difficult thing to listen to when it's being made. I enjoy it, and what the best part about that was when you guys come back, your County Board Commissioner meeting, you make a decision on the budget. All of that is documented for the public to review, if they choose to do so. If they don't choose to do so, they won't. But if it's there, they have that opportunity. That's the best thing about putting those meetings out for the public. Whether they watch them or not, they're there. They can see your contemplation on how you make decisions. So I want to thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you, Jeff.
Have a nice day.
All right. Anybody else?
Can I just ask Gary Griffin a question quick? What rules or laws are you quoting or following that says you guys, as the county, don't have to follow the same rules that all of us do? Where are these anywhere for me to read?
Gary, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I will send an email to you, sir, on exactly what I'm referring to, and the statutes you can review. But it mainly boils down to that the tax forfeited lands that are held in trust by the state are not subject to our local zoning laws. So our land use ordinance, that when you built your home, you were needed to meet certain setbacks to, in your case, I believe it was bluff issues, do not apply to tax forfeited property. Also, after measuring all, that's a challenging topography, I will agree with that. There was only one bluff determined to be on that property, and the county board went above and beyond to reserve the trees in the bluff, which was discussed back earlier this summer, last summer. But I will follow up with him with an email if that's okay, Commissioners.
Okay, because the state rules are exactly the same as yours. So if there were bluffs, but who did you send out to look at the bluff zones? Because when we've walked them, we agreed that they're probably bluffs.
Well, there's an actual technical definition of a bluff.
Yep.
It is, it's got to be 25 feet high.
Yep.
It's got to have at least 30% slope. A lot of times people will eyeball something. I hear it all the time. Oh, that's a bluff. That has to be a bluff. What's fortunate or unfortunate, depending on what side or what you're trying to accomplish, a lot of times very steep slopes are not technically bluffs.
But isn't a 30-degree slope about 18 degrees? I mean, that's not a very steep hill to meet those standards. I mean, every one of those is over 30% slope.
In 25 high, but up to you, Commissioners, how much you want me to continue to
Yeah, I think
answer.
Gary will follow up with you.
Okay.
And we'll, I guess, hopefully he'll be able to answer your questions, so. All right, one last call for open forum. Paul?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, this was, I did have a couple conversations, and I did ask the county administrator and Gary to look into this, and Gary is correct. Apparently we can, you know, cut those trees down. But if you remember, if you recall back, the county board did decide to cordon off some of those areas that were considered a bluff. And so that, I think that was a compromise. I completely understand where this gentleman is coming from when you got a county 40 next to you, and it's going to be logged off. It probably is not going to be very pretty, but that's what we do. We manage 105,000 acres of timber, and you know, some people are not going to be happy when it's an area where they might do their hunting or, you know, so I understand where he's coming from. I'd probably be upset too, but this is what we do. We manage the forest that the county owns, and then that money in turn is used for county parks, just a lot of recreation things, a lot of good things. That's where that money goes.
Thank you, Paul. All right. We are going to move on with our agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yep.
Somebody referred to the article in the paper that Mr. Simon responded to, but I also wanted to take a moment here to recognize Deborah Erickson. I think that this should give us confidence in our county in regards to the job that she does, that she's recognized as one of the very best in the business. She's recognized on a state and federal level. I think this says a lot for the people the job that she does, and also the judges that we have working our election process. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. All right. Item 3 on today's agenda is review and approve. Do you want to do this in one motion, or should we do it separate?
Either way.
Okay, we'll do it in one. The December 28th County Board meeting and the January 4th.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have
Second.
a motion by Commissioner Barrow, second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese?
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Thank you. Next item is review and approve today's agenda. Are there any?
Mr. Chair, we will be pulling that portion of the recommendation for the ARPA grant funds related to the sanitary sewer districts so that the subcommittee can meet with them and learn a little bit more about their requests. The rest of it will continue to move forward, daycare grants and the CIP. So I'll cover that under my report.
Motion to approve with changes.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Franzine, second by Commissioner Brecken. Therese?
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Thank you. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Are there any questions, concerns, comments?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese?
Commissioner Barrows?
Yes.
Commissioner Franzine?
Yes.
Commissioner Brecken?
Yes.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Motion passes. Item 6, land services.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Today here we have a proposed expansion to the Miller Black Bear Recreation Trail. Current trail is 20 miles in length, and the proposed expansion is an additional 12 and a half miles, about 6 1/4 miles of brand new trail and 6 1/4 miles of existing trail. We held a public comment period back in August of 2021 with 42 comments and 100% in favor of the trail expansion. The proposal was reviewed and approved by the Natural Resource Advisory Committee on January 5th. And so we're here today seeking approval from the board.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Any questions?
Well, yes, if I can, Mr. Chair. Is there any negative impact to this expansion?
No negative, there's one real small wetland crossing, several hundred feet, but it'll be boardwalks created over it to minimize those impacts, yep.
Good.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Brecken.
Oh, where'd you go?
I don't know. MIA.
All right, so Commissioner Franzine is absent for the vote. Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring? Commissioner?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, County Engineer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I have one item for you today, and it is the petition by the property owners. You can see the map there on Shalisa Lane. Shalisa Lane is in the First Assessment District, and it is actually a spur off of Welton Road. I believe Welton Road was paved a few years ago using this same process. The process I'm talking about is opportunities for those who live adjacent to gravel roads in the First Assessment District have an option to essentially assess themselves to have the road paved. And at the time Welton Road was paved using this process, so the property owners adjacent to Shalisa Lane were not ready to do so. Recently, they have come forward. I think some of the ownership has changed since the time, and have expressed an interest to use this policy to pave it. Recently, there was a community meeting to discuss how the costs of the assessment would be split. And that was something that we've modified a little bit, only to avoid the challenges we had on a recent one. You might be familiar with Carolyn Lane, where there was no real agreement among the landowners how to split it, and there's a lot of ways to split up these costs. The neighborhood meeting produced the agreement to split it equally among 10 lots that are benefiting from this, and those are in green. The two parcels in red did not sign the parcel, and speaking with Rob, who held the meeting, it was more of either way. So if they didn't feel like signing, they're comfortable with it being gravel. But 80% of the landowners would like to have it paved. And so according to the policy, the petition that meets 60% is presented to you, and the county board makes a decision whether to take the next step to call a public hearing, because that is part of the requirement. And we're asking that if you're in agreement with that, that it be set on February 22nd, where the agreeing and disagreeing landowners have an opportunity to come tell you about this process and whether they want to be assessed or not. And at that time, we'll have a better handle maybe on the actual cost. Right now, we're projecting it to be $58,000 split 10 ways. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? So I guess the question back to us is whether or not we want to move forward with a public hearing?
Yes, the recommendation is to accept the petition as presented, and that was in your packet with the signatures. And then to determine.
Accept. Okay.
I'm sorry. Did you make a motion? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't need to talk anymore. Okay.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Franzine to accept the proposal as is.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Barrows.
And the second part of that was the whole resolution to schedule the hearing for February 22nd.
Oh, okay. So that includes the public hearing. Okay.
Both, yep.
So we have a motion, a second. Any other comment? Hearing none. Therese?
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if we could return to the previous vote. Commissioner Franzine was out of the office. We have to take roll call votes. I want to for the record, confirm that you voted aye on the previous resolution related to
The trails.
the Black Bear Trail expansion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Item 8, County Sheriff.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, good morning. I brought along a graph today, and I'll ask Therese if she can pull it up for me. It was an addition. You did not get it in your packet, But, this kind of goes back to what keeps us as law enforcement up at night. We've always said the two biggest challenges we've got facing us are drugs and then the mental health crisis. There's a number of reports out that Minnesota is unfortunately kind of leading the way in mental health challenges across the nation. And what we do internally within the sheriff's office, and these numbers are just from the sheriff's office, they're not our local agencies that work in the cities, et cetera. What these numbers represent is when we're out at a call for service or out on a call, and we have a custom attribute that we can add to any call, and it's simply tagged as mental health. By no means are we mental health experts. We never claim to be and never will be. But anytime that we see challenges that are identified, we ask our deputies to use this custom attribute to help us track, because we've been trying to get a better grip on what we do and who we're dealing with, where our challenges are. So if anything, these numbers are low. Because if by accident, the deputy accidentally does not do that or forgets to assign that, if anything, these numbers are low. So the blue line there represents the calls for service that have been tasked or have been tagged as a mental health custom attribute. And what's concerning to me, if you look from 2018 to 2020, we've got an increase of roughly over 100 over 2 years. And then you look at 2020, and the reason that I bring it forward now is we were just able to wrap up our 2021 year. From 2020 to 2021, we've got virtually 160 plus increases in calls. So our current average is 1 call per day that the sheriff's office, not any PDs, just the sheriff's office, is responding to that's dealing with mental health. And this could be as simple as someone that has challenges, or it could be as extreme as someone that maybe is seeing something that's not there, or hearing voices, or hurting themselves, or attempting to hurt others. It could be any extreme. I point this out just as a talking point. And the 3 orange lines, I see it, I'm a little colorblind in some colors, but I'm going to call that orange. The 3 lines there are variations just using the algorithm in the Excel spreadsheet, showing what possibilities are we facing. The darkest line, the most bold line, is the best predictor. That's where if we continue on our current version of where we're going. The top line is kind of a worst case scenario. The bottom line is a best case scenario. Gut instinct, been doing this for longer, been a cop in my life than not being a cop in my life. I'm going to say that the bold line is a pretty good indicator of where we're headed in the future. Now, we have partnered very heavily, and we appreciate the work with community services. We are actually partnering right now with Tammy Lewick and her staff to try to come up with some new ideas, new roads that we can go down, new ideas that we can implement to better serve. But bring it up just as a talking point. I mean, this is really what we're facing, and we're not unique. If you go to any agency, really anywhere, you're going to see the same tracking that's going on. So just bring it to your attention. Something that we all are facing, and it's a sad state, but that's where we're at, and I think that's the trend that we're going to see in the future.
Mr. Chair, if I might ask, you've been in law enforcement long enough. So let's go back to the late 90s and early 2000s. Would this graph look the same during those years?
I think you would see a stagnant flat line back in the early 90s, 2000s. I could go through my memory bank of the calls that I've been on, and it was a rarity to deal with someone that I think we would see at the level that is now a consistent. So I think we sat stagnant for a while, but law enforcement has always dealt with mental health challenges. So I guess Commissioner, if that's your point, yes, it's always been a challenge, but have we seen a dramatic increase? Absolutely a dramatic increase.
My point is that back in, it would be in the early 2000s, and I don't remember exactly the year, when they shut down all the treatment centers, that began the time of pressure on our local law enforcement to deal more heavily with the mental health issue.
Without a doubt.
To me, that's a failing of the state system.
Without a doubt.
So when we look at this graph and receive that message, what that is telling us that what we chose, or the legislature chose to do in the early 2000s, this is the result of that.
I would completely agree with that statement. It seems that the tools in our tool belt that we had were taken away with, I think, good intentions of the time of replacing them, they were never replaced. You know, the knee-jerk reactions that we have seen at certain times, certain headlines that have reached even locally here. I can think of one knee-jerk reaction after the Aiken County investigator was murdered down in St. Cloud. The knee-jerk reaction from a number of facilities, we're not going to take anyone that's ever been on probation. Are you kidding me? The great majority of people that are suffering, that we're dealing with in this capacity, have had a contact with law enforcement and very well have, you know, are on some level of supervision. And you know, some of the knee-jerk answers that we've seen of, we're only going to accept X or Y, we're not going to accept this, has not favored us in any way. And we look at our staffing and you hear of the, you know, the concerns on every level with our hospitals, with our care facilities. This is really being swept into the closet and forgot on so many levels. I don't know where the answers are. If I were, I wouldn't be here. I'd be making a whole lot more money and telling everybody what to do in a different form. But we need someone to come forward with some ideas of how we can really address this. I'm very happy with the work we're doing, but our challenges are only going to increase, and it's going to be tough to meet. I mean, anywhere it's going to be tough to meet.
I think that law enforcement's done a great job, given what you have to deal with. Back when they switched to the CBHH, which are the community behavior health facilities versus the big campuses, they said they would not take the same clients or consumers, the real volatile ones, which you're dealing with, and they're the ones who go out on probation and cause you all kinds of issues, as we did at the bigger facilities. And I can tell you there's a difference between what they deal with out in Baxter and what we dealt with out on the campus out here, the type of clients. So that means your toughest ones are going to be in your facility, and they're going to be the most dangerous ones for your officers. And so to me, the only, if I go to California where they tore down their mental health system and now they're rebuilding it, that's the answer. The legislature needs to have the wherewithal to start to rebuild the process. And originally they had said, when they started closing the facilities, that Brainerd, St. Peter, and Anoka would be the 3 geographic areas where they would maintain that system. And they chose not to do that. So essentially, it became only Anoka.
Right.
And then they were going to have a nice transportation system that would help move individuals from facility to facility. They were going to keep them closer to home, blah, blah, blah. I won't go on any further. I'm getting on my horse.
Yeah, it was.
So I apologize, but Sheriff, I agree with you, and you guys have done a great job. And all across the state, they've done a great job. Unfortunately, the legislature doesn't seem to be willing to address the misguided process they took in the early 2000s. Enough from Steve Barrows.
Commissioner, I should have had you open this, because your points are spot on. Thank you.
Concerning numbers.
It is, it really is. I mean, you know, it's, the job of law enforcement is nothing what it used to be. And it's expected in some parts of it, but our jail is consistently housing special needs that we all agree are people that should not be in our facility. And yet, where else can they go? And, you know, we're working with the courts, we work with the county attorney every day. Our morning updates that we do every morning, we have an 8:30 brief that we've got incorporated with probation and community services. Mental health, I mean, every day there is at least one of, hey, can you call this person? Or this person was on our radar yesterday. So we're working with what we've got, but it's going to be a challenge that will continue to only get more of a draw on every resource.
Thank you. Anything else, Scott?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner Barrows.
There's no cheap way out of mental health care. I will say that. Anybody that sells you that ship is telling you a lie. Period.
All right.
Thank you.
Item 9, County Attorney.
I don't have anything for you today, Mr. Chairman, but I certainly would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Don? Nope. Seeing none, thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Item 10, County Administrator.
Mr. Chair, We had a senior management team meeting yesterday and had robust discussions calibrating the direct reports for the SMT members for performance ratings for the end of the year. We talked about remote work and some of the challenges that can create for us for workers' compensation issues. And so we're trying to figure out our way forward to make sure that we have the proper risk management decisions being made as it relates to remote work. We talked a little bit about the internal project review for our ARPA projects, and to the sheriff's point, I know that there are a couple of internally proposed projects that are related to mental health, one of them trying to get mental health services into the squad. And so I think that I'm cautiously optimistic that there's at least some productive ideas internally to try to figure out if we can move the needle on this, because it is an important issue in our community. So we were talking about the other projects that are competing for our American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We also talked a little bit about staff issues due to Omicron. Omicron, what we know about it is much more highly transmissible, not as severe. And so it still, however, causes disruptions as people either get ill and have to be out of the workplace or have contact with someone, and we have shorter periods for isolation now, but there's still periods for isolation. Some people we can send home with some work and they can work remotely if they're not ill, but just exposed. Some people we don't have work to send home. And so the disruptions associated with all of that and how we're managing, what I would tell you is my sense from listening to all of the SMT members is that Omicron is disruptive to us, but we have managed to come up with alternative strategies that are helping us to still meet all of our service needs. So I was pleased to hear that because I wasn't sure how much of a disruption it was. And then we had a discussion on excellence nominations for our SharePoint site. Happy to answer any questions about that or anything related to county government.
Any questions for Tim? None.
Mr. Chair, also in your packet is a recommended board action for our American Rescue Plan Act dollars. You may recall back on March 11th, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act, now known as ARPA. And it was signed into law. Crow Wing County's allocation is estimated to be about $12 million in two payments. We got the first payment of $6 million, and we will not be eligible for the second payment of $6 million until I believe it's this coming June or thereabouts. There are certain qualifying criteria for expenses that we can spend our ARPA funds on. The U.S. Treasury issued its final guidance last week that allowed for a $10 million revenue loss, which will make it much easier for us to meet the qualifying criteria. We believe that everything that we are presenting for you today will meet the ARPA criteria and will not need the $10 million revenue loss. So this will go towards our $2 million that we need to be meeting the requirements. On October 26th, you may recall that the board chair appointed Commissioners Brecken and Hoag as a subcommittee of the board to review the grant applications that were coming in and make a recommendation to the full board, and they have a recommendation, and we're here with it today. We believe that all of the projects will meet the ARPA criteria. The CIP projects that were identified here are projects that you've already approved through the CIP. And so what we're essentially asking you to do is to change the funding source from levy dollars to ARPA funds for those projects. And so the only approval the board is really doing, you've already approved the projects, you're approving the change in funding, if that makes sense. The board subcommittee met with the staff from Bladec and from the county and reviewed all of the daycare grant applications with them. We have staff that were here that day. Unfortunately, I was not. So hopefully if there's any questions, those could be answered about the subcommittee's deliberation. We're not prepared at this point to move on the other priorities that we've identified. Broadband is one of them. Internal project needs is another one. We pulled the sewer district requests for today. So there's still some ARPA stuff that's moving. This is what I would call phase one of that. The recommended action today is to approve the attached list of grants to daycare operators to expand access to childcare in Crow Wing County, as well as authorizing the use of ARPA funds to cover the costs associated with the attached list of capital improvement projects. Further, the board subcommittee is No, we pulled that last recommendation. So, Mr. Chair, I put it forward for your consideration and happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions?
Well, no, not at this time, but I would like to ask Mr. Chair if we could have Tyler Glenn address and talk a little bit about going through the child care that he came with.
Absolutely.
Chelsea and I have a deal on making sure she gets the right picture today. No. We spoke about this before I stepped here. Tyler Glenn, Executive Director of Bladek. Our process was set up where we opened up the application period for 5 weeks. It started at the end of November, or at the end of October, and closed with the first week of December. Through that process, we received 29 applications. Of those 29 applications that came through, varying sizes of requests, obviously, but primarily the goal with this was to make sure that we addressed our primary need of creating slots for childcare in Crow Wing County. Our data showed us at the beginning of the year when our group completed a survey of all of our providers throughout Crow Wing County, and with our work with the First Children's Finance Group, that we had roughly 1,200 slots that we were lacking here in Crow Wing County. So obviously a tremendous need for us here, but also throughout the state. I would tell you that this county, with the work that we do, this county is the first one to address this. So again, hats off to all of you for getting behind this, and hats off to the administrative staff for pushing this forward, because I think this is an extremely important thing to address right now. As you can see with the list that is provided up there, we have everything from in-home childcare to center-based childcare. There are some differences with regards to some of these are brand new, which is exciting, but it's also covering the full spectrum, I believe, of the county. So we are having impact in each one of the districts that you all support and cover. So it's important for us that we made sure that we were identifying those and making sure that there were being addressed in all of the districts throughout Crow Wing County. We have one, I'll just pull one as an example, a new facility, Monarch Beginnings, which is up in Emily. Emily currently has no daycare. So this is a really important add-on to the daycare services that are provided in Crow Wing County. That one is anticipating adding 35 brand new slots. So when you add 35 brand new slots to that portion of our county, it's really exciting to see this, and they worked with us as well as the SBDC, so the Small Business Development Center, and First Children's Finance to develop one of probably the nicest business plans I've seen. And we work with business plans every day, but they did a fantastic job, and we're very fortunate to have those relationships with those organizations to help us through this process as well. We scored these. Our staff scored them, as well as the county staff. We went through a scoring process to identify what their budget looked like, their narrative, and also the slots that were being created. So it was a good process for us. A lot of great questions. One of the things that we wanted to make sure, and it was in our guidance with this, is that one of the things that we couldn't fund through some of these requests was adding to fund their increase in staff. So it's really challenging for us to say, yes, you have staffing issues. Most of these child cares have staffing issues, but the money that is allocated through the ARPA funds is not to be able to address that. These funds cannot be used to increase wages for their staff. So there are some adjustments in some of these numbers that were up there, and primarily those adjustments that were made were based off of the requests that came through were asking for additional funding to help them increase the wages of their employees. The other item that we worked very closely with is with Michelle Taugis, who is the representative at Sourcewell, to identify, certainly inside of this, what are licensing issues. So if the requests came through and these were wants versus needs, the needs were addressed because they were related directly to licensing issues, making sure that they had appropriate flooring, as an example, or if they had to put in a new furnace, if you will, for some of these requests, and those were addressed with the allocations of funding here. So that was our process.
I want to thank Commissioner Hoag and Commissioner Brecken we met with them as well to go through these lists and understand what it was that we were looking to fund with the staff, with the use of staff as well. Very comfortable with this, and this is, again, as you saw in Administrator Hoole's report, this is addressing, this is creating an additional 200 slots for childcare in Crow Wing County. So that's very exciting to be able to be moving forward with that as well. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions?
Nope. Mr. Chair?
Yes. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm upset with Tyler. He's stealing my wants versus needs speech. That's the speech I always give.
Where the other side of this.
Good job, Tyler. I think you do a great job.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Coring. The other side is sustainability. And this is a hard thing for us to say. Sustainability is created through funding. I mean, not through funding, but through wages. And this is something that's going to have to come from other sources, because the sustainability of in-home and even the center-based is certainly the wage component to this. Some of the larger, as you see certainly with the YMCA, they've got this figured out. They understand how to pay their staff, and obviously the funding with an organization that size comes from multiple sources, so they're able to do that. But it is going to be a concern moving forward, obviously, especially with our center bases. Most of these people are making between $12 and $14 an hour. So if there's a way somehow that money can come along so they can increase the wages for these folks, that's going to help, and it's going to help keep these facilities open. But during COVID, I will say one last thing. During COVID, our data showed us that 43, I believe was the number that we had settled on, was 43 in-home daycares were closed. 43. That's a big number, and that's a hard one to take. And if you look at in each one of these, even if they take 5 kids, that's a lot of slots that are lost. So impact-wise, we have a lot of these folks that are staying in the business, which is fantastic, but we have some new in-home folks that are jumping back in, which is really exciting. So happy that they're doing that, and very pleased with the work that all of those do to make sure our kids are taken care of. Anything else?
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Good start to a big problem. All right. Tim?
Mr. Chair, I put it forward with your recommendation to approve the abstract that you have attached for daycare grants and for CIP projects to be funded with ARPA funds.
Mr. Chair, I'd so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Brecken, second by Commissioner Barrows. Any discussion? Hearing none. Therese?
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Hall?
Aye. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you also have a request for board action in your packet to appoint Sean Jarvala to replace Diane Cash as the City of Crosby representative on the Serpent Lake Sanitary Sewer District Board of Directors for the term expiring on 12/31 of '22, and to prepare a certificate of appreciation for Ms. Cash for her service to Crow Wing County. Mr. Chair, I believe historically we've done that by vote.
Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Franzine, second by Commissioner Barrows. Any discussion? None. Therese?
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, also enclosed in your packet are some appointments to the Northeast Minnesota Regional Radio Advisory Committee. Historically, we had Scott Heidi and John Bowen from the Sheriff's Office be our delegates to the advisory committee, and the Sheriff's Office is recommending to appoint our 911 Operations Lieutenant Jessica Turner as our delegate, and to have Scott Heidi serve as the alternate. And I believe those are appointments the chair can make.
Okay, I will go ahead and make those appointments.
Mr. Chair, also enclosed in your packet was a request for board action to set a public hearing for a road vacation petition that we've received in the unorganized territory for a road titled Ash Avenue. You know, these are typically roads that are in plats that never got built. I think this is one of those. So acting as the town board for the unorganized territory, schedule a public hearing to be held on February 22nd during your regular board meeting regarding vacating a portion of Ash Avenue.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question. On the map, it shows a black line that says Maple Drive, but is that just somebody drew that line on there? Because the road actually is different than that, although it's the same kind of arc.
Ash Avenue, as I understand it, is this cross-hatched section right here.
Okay.
Maple Drive is the road that's running along here.
But when you look, if you would enlarge that, the yellow lines that indicate Maple Drive
Do not follow the
does not
other
follow that, so
lines.
are we out of compliance with how that road is laid out?
Mr. Chair, I think that there probably is some difference between where the road is platted and where the road is actually at. I think it's highlighted because it was residents who were living on Maple Drive were some of the ones that were eligible to sign the petition to be able to vacate it, but it most likely is not in the same place as what it's platted to be.
So to our county highway engineer, will this be a problem in the future?
Could be.
For Maple Drive, I'm not talking about Ash Avenue.
I don't know that I would attach a great deal of significance to the black line here. I think it is probably an approximation of where we thought the road was. The yellow lines, which are hard to see there, but if you look underneath the yellow lines, I believe that is where the road is.
I believe that too. I'm just wondering, you know, we talk about not being in the right place, and then having to go
put
back and
lines-
correct that later on.
We put lines into, we have a layer in our GIS map that is for roads, and I think those are just lines, which is not the right width when you blow it to this scale. I think that's what's happening.
I was just talking with my staff, and we have not had a chance to weigh in or are aware of this. Some of the residents had maybe visited when we were out with doing our 115 work, but nothing official has come through our office, so we haven't had a chance to take a look or provide a recommendation. But we will if you set the public hearing, certainly.
So I just raised that, you know, like, but I'll make the motion to set the public hearing for the road vacation in unorganized territory for Ash Avenue.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Brecken. Any discussion? Therese?
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 11 is additional business. Anybody have anything? Item 12 is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese?
Commissioner Brecken?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner
Aye.
Barrows? Commissioner Franzine? Commissioner Hoag?
Aye. Thank you. We are.